To speak of the Imperium of man is to speak of 1,000,000 worlds and 1,000,000 more still scattered like fractured jewels across the unforgiving dark of the galaxy. It is to speak of quadrillions of human souls, a tide of flesh and faith that rises and falls with each brutal century. And it is to speak of a singular, all-consuming purpose: survival. The Imperium exists only to wage an eternal, hopeless war. It is a war fought against the alien, the mutant, and the heretic, a war fought in the shadow of damnation, a war that can never be won, but must never, ever be lost. Every citizen from the highest High Lord on Holy Terra to the lowest indentured laborer dying in the radioactive sludge of a forge world exists to serve this grand, terrifying machine. Humanity is the fuel for this engine, its faith, the shield, its blood, the lubricant. And this engine is thirsty. Its nervous system, the impossibly vast, utterly soulless bureaucracy that connects its 1,000,000 limbs, is the Adeptus Administratum. From the segmentum palaces to the most remote data vaults, trillions of clerks, censors, and proctors toil in a galaxy-spanning network of impossible complexity. They are the great unblinking eye that sees all records all and demands all. To them, worlds are not homes, they are not cradles of culture or history, they are assets, they are numbers on a ledger defined by their tithe grade. A world is its output, nothing more. Its worth is measured in the tons of material it can provide, the regiments it can raise, the resources it can bleed. A planet that fails to produce is not a tragedy. It is an inefficiency. And the Administratum has no tolerance for inefficiency. This is the nature of the imperial tithe. It is not tax, as the ancients would have understood it. Tax is a portion of wealth. The tithe is a measure of existence. The tithe is the blood price of safety, the cost of the emperor's protection, a protection that manifests not as peace, but as the promise of glorious righteous war. What is the tithe? It is the flesh of humanity. It is the Astra Militarum, the Imperial Guard. Entire generations born on fortress worlds, raised from infancy to hold a laser gun, to march in perfect unison, and to die on some forgotten, unnamed planet, light years from the home they will never see again. They are the tithe of men, a line item in a ledger that reads, 10 regiments Cadian standard approved for attrition on the Scylla front. What is the tithe? It is the iron sinew of the machine. It is the promethium siphoned from toxic refinery worlds, the fuel that fires the vast plasma engines of the Imperial Navy. It is the shells, the laspacks, the armor plating, the endless grinding output of 1 billion factories on 1,000 forge worlds, each dedicated to producing the tools of death. Without this tithe of materiel, the fleets would drift silent in the void, the guns would fall quiet, and the darkness would swarm in unopposed. What is the tithe? It is the very sustenance of the organism. It is the grain from the agri-world's flat, sprawling planets whose entire populations are serfs dedicated to a single sacred task, harvesting. They raise mountains of foodstuffs, megatons of grain and protein, destined not for their own tables, but for the cavernous holds of transport ships. This food will feed the choking, starving, overpopulated hive world's vast city planets, where billions live and die without ever seeing the sky. It will feed the guard regiments at the front, the navy crews in the void. Without this tithe of sustenance, the great hives would collapse into cannibalistic anarchy within a year. The war machine itself would grind to a halt, starved of the calories needed to fight. The tithe is not a request. It is a sacred decree sealed in the Emperor's name. To pay it is a world's solemn duty. To be late is a sin. To be short is a crime against all of humanity. Failure to meet the tithe is not an economic failing. It is heresy. It is a declaration that your world's needs, your world's life is more valuable than the survival of the Imperium itself. This is a logic so profane, so utterly blasphemous that it cannot be permitted to exist. The response to such a failure is not a negotiation. It is a visitation from the Ordo Hereticus, a fleet from the Imperial Navy, or if the failure is catastrophic enough, the righteous judgment of the Exterminatus. The Imperium, the Administratum, does not care why you failed, it only cares that you failed. And deep within the heart of the Imperium on Holy Terra itself, this truth is the only truth. Here in the galactic east of the solar segmentum lies the Scriptorum massive hall of the tithed worlds. It is a chamber so vast that its ceiling is lost in man-made gloom. The air is thick with the scent of old parchment ozone and recycled air. Thousands upon thousands of scribe prefectus, their bodies stooped, their faces pale in the dim glow of their data slates labor, in perfect, terrified silence. The only sounds are the scratching of autoquills, the clicking of cogitator keys, and the distant sonorous chime that marks the passage of another work cycle. These men and women are not warriors. They are accountants, the lowliest cogs in the greatest machine. They do not think, they calculate. They do not judge, they record. A single red light begins to flash on the data slate of Scribe Prefectus Valerius 7th class. It is a small, insistent blink, one among billions on this vast floor. It is an error of lateness, a standard alert. The transport vessel Harvester's Bounty callsign Sol Theta 9 has missed its scheduled arrival at the Segmentum's primary way station. It is 3 standard weeks late. The Harvester's Bounty is the primary transport for the annual tithe of the planet Agria Secundus. It is an agri-world tithe grade primus. Its cargo 30 million tons of sanctified grain. 30 million tons of food that is no longer in the Administratum's predictive models. The red light flashes. A discrepancy, an error in the grand calculation. The Scribe Prefectus does not sigh. He does not worry. He simply dips his quill and opens a new file. The ledger is unbalanced, and the ledger must be balanced. Scribe Prefectus Valerius was a creature of ritual. His world was 8 feet by 4 feet, the precise dimensions of his scriptorium alcove in Hall Sub Delta 9. His universe was the glowing green picked slate before him, a universe of shipping manifests, tithe grades, and logistical projections. He had served in this alcove for 38 years. He had not seen the sun in 39. Valerius was less a man than a human component, a fleshy cogitator whose biological processes were a minor, inefficient distraction from his true function. His spine was permanently curved to match the arc of his high-backed stool. His fingers were stained black with ink and gray with data slate residue. His eyes, magnified by thick lenses, saw the Imperium not as a realm of people, but as a river of data. His job was to ensure the river flowed. The red alert for Agria Secundus was at this stage unremarkable. He processed it with the same emotional detachment with which he processed a notice of increased servitor lubricant rations. A delay of 3 weeks was common. Warp storms flared, navigators grew blind, Geller fields failed. These were accepted variables in the grand equation of interstellar logistics. His bony fingers tapped a sequence of commands, his movements practiced and economical. He opened the Harvester's Bounty file. Status in transit unlogged. Cargo sustenance tithe grade primus. Origin Agria Secundus. Destination Castor Prime substation. The file was clean. Agria Secundus was a model asset. Tithe grade primus, compliance record flawless, population stable devout, PDF rating sufficient. It had paid its tithe on time, without fail, for 900 standard years. It was a boring, reliable, efficient world. This made the delay an anomaly, but not yet a threat. It was a mathematical inconsistency, and Valerius's entire existence was dedicated to resolving such things. He activated his communion bead. Cogitator servitor, his voice was a dry rasp, like sand on parchment. Query active. Cross-reference shipping lane Sol Hyperia 9 for known warp tide anomalies. Period last 6 solar weeks. A speaker grill above his alcove crackled. A synthesized voice devoid of all inflection replied. Querying lane Sol Hyperia 9. Status green. No anomalies logged. No astropathic distress signals recorded. Valerius processed this. No storm, no reported pirate activity, no echo of disaster screaming through the Imperium. This moved the problem from act of God to potential error. He tapped another sequence. He did not think. He did not speculate. He followed the procedure. The Manual of Administrative Procedure, Volume 941B, Tithe, Lateness, and Shortfall dictated his next action precisely. He opened a new communique template. Form Tithe Query Standard. Priority Amber Triad. His fingers flew across the data slate, inputting the relevant codes. He was not writing a message. He was assembling a data packet. To Lord Governor Agria Secundus. From Adeptus Administratum Terra Scriptorum. Massive Hall Sub Delta 9. Subject Tithe, Non-Compliance Lateness. Reference Harvester's Bounty Vessel. Agria Secundus. Origin Sustenance. Tithe Annual Cargo. Body Query. Vessel is 3 standard weeks past designated arrival window. No warp anomaly cited. No distress signal received. Your compliance record is flawless. This communication serves as first official notice. You are ordered to provide immediate status update and revised arrival projection. Failure to respond within 2 solar weeks will result in elevation of status to query threat. Stamp auto-verified Scribe Prefectus Valerius 7th class, thought for the day. Obedience is the first duty of the righteous. He authorized the packet. With a faint electronic squeal, the message was compressed, coded and shunted miles beneath the scriptorum to the waiting hollow minds of the astro-telepathic choir. An astropath, his eyes bound in sanctified silks, would receive the message, process its cold logic, and then at great cost to his own soul, scream it across the galaxy toward the Agria Secundus system. Valerius watched the picked slate confirm query sent. He closed the file. The blinking red light was replaced by a small amber icon. Query pending. His work was done. He had followed the procedure. The discrepancy was for now resolved from his ledger. He turned his attention to the next item in his queue, a shortfall in Prometheum refinement from the Forges of Riza. The fate of a world had been queried, and the man responsible had already forgotten its name. The 2 solar weeks dictated by Valerius's query passed with the inexorable grinding certainty of a tectonic plate. In the scriptorum, massive 2 weeks was a meaningless sliver of time, a brief flicker in the eternal cycle of data processing. For Valerius, those 2 weeks were filled with 10,000 other data points, 10,000 other manifests and shipping errors. He did not and could not remember the name Agria Secundus, but the machine remembered. On the 14th day, the Cogitator Servitor network that governed his alcove registered the expiration of the deadline. The file for Agria Secundus, buried under mountains of new data, was automatically recalled. The amber query pending icon, which had sat dormant and patient, began to flash. It pulsed for 1 hour, a final grace period offered by the cold logic of the system. And then, precisely as the hour turned, the icon shifted. It became a deep, insistent, violent red. Query failed, status unresponsive. This was no longer a simple delay. A simple delay was a logistical problem. An unanswered query, a silence from a grade primus asset, was an insult to the entire structure of the Adeptus Administratum. It was a statistical impossibility that had just become a recorded fact. The file was instantly and automatically ripped from the queue of Scribe Prefectus Valerius. An alert chimed on his slate, informing him, Chaos Agria Secundus elevated. Jurisdiction transferred. He felt a flicker of what in a lesser man might have been relief. The error was no longer his to solve. The data packet traveled upwards, not physically, but hierarchically. It left the endless droning halls of the Scribe Prefectus core and entered the rarefied, pressurized quiet of the Sensorite chambers. The file appeared on the master slate of Sensorite Hax. Hax was a different order of being from Valerius. Where Valerius was a cog, Hax was a piston. He was a man who had earned the right to have his own augmetic eye, a cold blue lens that whirred quietly as it scanned the data. He did not just record, he analyzed. His job was not to note the error, but to assign its cost. He reviewed the file in seconds, his augmented eye absorbing the data far faster than his organic one. 900 years of flawless compliance. Grade Primus Agri-World. Tithe 30 million tons of grain. 2 sword-class frigates, the Righteous Blade, and the Emperor's Will assigned as standard escort. All 3 vessels, Harvester's Bounty, Righteous Blade, Emperor's Will, all silent. Unacceptable hacks, whispered his voice, a dry static. He opened a link to the Naval Command data shrine. He cross-referenced the subsector. No major Orkwagis reported. The green tide was flowing towards the Damocles Gulf, far from Egria Secundus. No significant Drukhari pirate signatures detected. The raiders preferred the richer shipping lanes near the Segmentum Obscurus. No Chaos fleet incursions. The eye of Terra was stirring, but its gaze was fixed elsewhere. The Harvester's Bounty and its 2 military-grade escorts had not been overcome by a common threat. They had not run into a statistical hazard. They had quite simply vanished. Sensorite Hacks tapped his fingers on his desk. This was a deficit. A hole in the Imperial budget. The 30 million tons of grain from Agria Secundus were already allocated. They were in the Administratum's predictive models already being consumed by the teeming billions of the manufacturing hive world Castor Prime. The loss of the Harvester's Bounty did not just mean the loss of a ship. It meant that in 6 months Castor Prime would begin to starve. Starvation led to food riots. Food riots led to PDF suppression. PDF suppression led to a drop in manufacturing. A drop in manufacturing on Castor Prime meant fewer lasguns for the Cadian regiments on the front line. The entire Imperial war machine was a chain, and this single, silent planet had just broken a link. Hax's organic eye narrowed. He dictated a new note into the file, his voice cold and precise. Status elevated, deficit in question. The silence of Agria Secundus is total. The loss of 2 naval escorts alongside the primary transport vessel suggests a coordinated external threat or a catastrophic internal failure. Possibilities: localized warp anomaly, undetected, unrecorded, engulfed all 3 vessels simultaneously. Statistical probability 7.9%. Major pirate action, a force capable of overwhelming 2 sword-class frigates without a single distress signal. Statistical probability 4.2%. Willful non-compliance, sedition. Heresy. Statistical probability 0.1% based on compliance record. Data error. The vessels have arrived and the system has failed to log them. Statistical probability 0%. He paused, his augmetic eye focusing on the 3rd possibility. Heresy was rare, but it was always the most costly variable. Recommendation, he continued. Elevate the Tithe grade of 3 adjacent agri-worlds, Cygnus Tria Pollux 9 and Orpheus Minor, by 5% to cover projected shortfall for Castor Prime. Initiate formal inquiry. This deficit is now officially recognized. He stamped the file. The status of Agria Secundus was no longer delayed. It was missing, and in the ledgers of the Imperium, missing was just the first step toward lost. The file, now bearing the ominous red flag of deficit in question, was presented in the conclave chamber of the subsector Solar Proctors. This was not a room of flashing maps or shouting generals. It was a sterile grey hemisphere of polished stone, silent, save for the subtle hum of the air purifiers. 10 figures sat around a vast circular table, their faces obscured by the shadows cast by the single harsh lumen orb suspended above. These were the Proctor Majoris, the senior accountants of 1,000,000 worlds. They were the men and women who calculated the cost of living and the price of death for entire civilizations. Proctor Majoris Thrax presided. He was an ancient thing, his body more machine than man, his original face long since replaced by an impassive brass plate. Only his voice, a metallic monotone, remained. "We begin," Thrax's vox emitter crackled. "Agenda item, the Agria Secundus deficit. Sensorite hacks present the variable." Sensorite hacks, small and fleshy in this room of titans, stood. His blue augmetic eye whirred as it projected a data stream onto the table's surface. Proctor's Hax began, his voice flat. At 0400 cycle Agria Secundus Grade Primus Agri-World officially entered deficit status. Its annual sustenance tithe of 30 million tons is now 5.1 weeks overdue. Primary transport harvesters Bounty and naval escorts Righteous Blade and Emperor's Will are non-responsive and presumed lost. No distress signal was logged, no known warp anomalies were present. The asset is silent. A proctor to Thrax's left, a woman encased in a life support rig that hissed with every breath spoke. The why is irrelevant. It is a problem for the Navy, perhaps the Ordos. Our problem is the what, the 30 million tons. Precisely, Proctor Viridia Hax nodded, switching the projection. A new series of charts appeared. This is the consumption projection for Hive World Castor Prime Segmentum Solar. Castor Prime's manufacturums are responsible for 12% of the Segmentum's lasgun production. Its population, rated at 88 billion, is entirely dependent on off-world sustenance. The Agria Secundus shipment was its primary supply for the next 2 work cycles. The chart showed a red line population sustenance needs and a green line available sustenance. In 6 months, the green line plummeted while the red line continued. The gap between them was labeled Projected Manpower Sustenance Gap. Castor Prime will begin to starve in 24 weeks, Thrax stated, interpreting the data. Riots will commence in 26 weeks. Production will collapse in 28. The Scylla front will suffer a 12% munitions deficit as a result. This is the consequence. This is the deficit. He looked at Hax. Your recommendation for remediation, Sensorite. The deficit must be balanced. Hax said, as if reciting a catechism. The burden must be reallocated. The Agri-Worlds Cygnus Tria Pollux 9 and Orpheus Minor are within viable astropathic range and possess the logistical capacity to increase output. Their tithe is already rated at Maximus Proctor Viridia Hist. An increase will strip their own populations below subsistence levels. That variable has been factored in, Hax replied, his augmetic eye glowing. A 5.8% tithe increase divided amongst those 3 assets will cover the Castor Prime shortfall. This will result in an anticipated compliance friction food riots, localized insurrection on all 3 worlds. Our projections estimate a 20 to 25% population loss on those assets due to famine and subsequent PDF enforcement. The room was silent. The proctors stared at the numbers. 25% of 3 worlds, billions of lives, weighed against a 12% drop in lasgun production. The calculation was simple. The conclusion obvious. It is acceptable, Proctor Majoris Thrax said. The decision was made. The why of Agria Secundus is a problem for another department. The what is our jurisdiction. The tithe will be met. Issue the remediation orders to the 3 assets. Non-negotiable. As the proctors began to move to the next agenda item, a fuel rod shortage on Mars, a junior clerk at the room's edge dared to speak. Proctor Majoris, a secondary note. The Sensorite's file mentioned another tithe from Agria Secundus, a tithe of men. Hax consulted his data slate. Correct. 2 regiments of PDF Auxilia, the 212th and 213th Agrian Foot. They were scheduled for reinforcement duty on the Scylla front. Thrax's brass face did not move. He had already dismissed the matter. The loss of 20,000 men was a rounding error. But procedure was procedure. Clark, his voice boomed. Send a data packet priority tau to the Departamento Munitorum. Subject tithe of men Agria Secundus. Status indefinitely interrupted. They will need to adjust their projections for the Scylla front. That is all. He turned back to the conclave. The fate of billions had been decided in a single calculation of acceptable loss. And the 2 regiments of soldiers who were never raised were now just a footnote in a file about missing grain. The logistical hole left by Agria Secundus had been plugged. The burden had been redistributed. The starvation of Castor Prime had been averted, paid for by the programmed starvation of 3 other worlds. In the Scriptorum Massive, the file was considered closed. But in the Sensorite chambers it was not. Sensorite Hax stared at the file, his augmetic eye tracing the same data points again and again. 900 years of flawless compliance. Then, nothing. The deficit was balanced, but the equation was unsolved. Why had an asset, a perfectly functioning cog in the Imperial machine, suddenly ceased to turn? This was not just a logistical failure, it was an administrative insult. A loose thread that, if left unpulled, could unravel the entire tapestry of the subsector's Tithe projections. "We cannot leave this," Hax said to the empty room. "The why is a dangerous variable." He did not request a military response. A naval battle group was a phenomenally expensive asset. To dispatch one without clear evidence of a military threat was inefficient. That was the jurisdiction of Lord Admirals, not accountants. He did not request an inquisitor. The Inquisition was a blunt, messy instrument. They saw heresy in every shadow and burned assets that could, with proper management, be salvaged. They were a tool of last resort, and the situation had not yet escalated beyond the need for a precise calculation. No, this required something else. It required an audit. He submitted a request, Form 77 Alpha request for field examination. The request was approved by Proctor Majoris Thrax, who understood the need to balance the books even if it meant sending someone to balance them in person. The Administratum needed to send one of its own. Not a warrior, not a priest, but an auditor. Auditor Fiscalis Krell was a man who believed the entire galaxy was a single vast ledger. His purpose in life was to ensure that in the end it all balanced. He was a thin, gaunt man with a face that looked like it had been carved from dry soapstone. His robes were grey, immaculate, and severe. His only augmetic was a data port set into the back of his right hand, allowing him to commune directly with data slates. When Hax summoned him, Krell was concluding an audit of the Hydrofor Void Station. He had just proven through a meticulous 9-month review of fuel rod manifests that the station master had been misallocating 0.04% of Promethium stores to unsanctioned civilian traffic. The station master had been executed for theft against the Imperial Tithe, and Krell was currently calculating the precise retroactive interest owed by the man's surviving family. Auditor Fiscalis Krell Hax began not bothering with pleasantries. He pushed the Agria Secundus file across the table. "You will be our instrument." Krell inserted his data port into the slate, his eyes closing in concentration. He did not read the file. He absorbed it. He processed the 9 centuries of compliance, the 30 million tons of grain, the 2 lost frigates, the total deafening silence. His eyes snapped open. "An anomaly," he stated. His voice was like a dry switch. "The compliance record is too clean. A sudden total failure of this magnitude without precursor, it suggests a foundational miscalculation. The initial Tithe assessment may have been flawed." "We do not believe it was flawed," Auditor Hax said. "We believe it was compromised. We have requisitioned a vessel for you, a Chartist Captain's courier, the Swift Prophet. It is fast. It is not, however, armed for war." Krell nodded. It was appropriate. "My tools. You will be issued," Hax continued reading from a list, "with 2 standard combat servitors, chassis type Goliath for transport and protection. You will have a 2-man team of subsector enforcers. Not soldiers, Krell, they are crowd control. You will also carry this." Hax produced a heavy vellum-bound scroll case, its wax seal bearing the twin-headed eagle of the Adeptus Terra. "A writ of audit. It grants you absolute binding authority to examine any and all records of the planetary governor, Lord Governor Tolus. You are to find his ledger, examine his books, and locate the source of this deficit. If he is incompetent, you will note it. If he is corrupt, you will note it. If he is dead, you will find who is responsible." Krell took the writ. This was his weapon. More potent than a power sword, more final than a bolt shell. It was the weight of Imperial bureaucracy made manifest. "And if I find willful non-compliance," Krell asked, his voice unchanged. "You are an accountant, Auditor. You are not an executioner." Hax said, his augmetic eye whirring. "But you will carry a single-use astropathic beacon. If you confirm heresy or Xenos contamination, you will activate it." The why will cease to be our department's concern, and the matter will be passed to more direct auditors. Within the hour, Krell and his small, unimpressive entourage were aboard the Swift Prophet. The Chartist captain argued, pleaded, and finally wept at the requisitioning of his ship, but the writ of audit, even a copy, silenced him. As the ship disengaged from its mooring and prepared to make the long, multi-month jump to the Agria Secundus system, Krell was not on the bridge. He was in his small grey cabin. He had downloaded the last 100 years of Agria Secundus's trade and production manifests. He was not preparing for a fight. He was not afraid. He was an auditor on his way to find a rounding error. He would find who was responsible for this inefficiency, and he would ensure the ledger was balanced one way or another. The final transition from the Imperium was a violent physical insult. The Swift Prophet, a vessel built for speed and not comfort, tore its way back into real space with a groan of stressed metal and a lurch that sent unsecured items crashing to the decks. The Chartist captain, a man named Prell, retched into a reclamation bin. Auditor Fiscalis Krell did not. He sat strapped in his severe, unpadded chair, his eyes closed, his breathing perfectly even. The sickness of the warp was a known variable, a temporary inefficiency in the process of travel. He simply waited for it to pass, calculating the man-hours lost. When the ship's Geller field emitters whined down and the gut-twisting nausea subsided, Krell opened his eyes. Report, he commanded, his voice as dry as the air in his cabin. Captain Prell wiped his mouth, his face pale and clammy. We are here, Lord Auditor. Agria Secundus. We have translated into the designated... He stopped his own words, catching in his throat as he looked at the main view screen. Krell unstrapped himself and moved to the bridge. The view was wrong. The planet Agria Secundus was there, a vast mottled orb of green and brown, precisely as the data files had described. But the space around it was empty. Utterly unnaturally empty. An asset of this grade, a grade Primus Agri world, should have an orbit that was a frantic, buzzing hive of activity. There should have been a web of ships, massive, slow-moving transports like the Harvester's Bounty waiting their turn, Chartist vessels haggling for scraps, Navy patrols moving with arrogant purpose, system defense ships buzzing between way stations. There was nothing. Not a single ship, not one. Where is the traffic? Krell's voice was sharp. I do not know. Lord Prell stammered, his hands flying over his console. No registry pings, no identification codexes are answering. The primary shipping lanes are clear. Krell's gaze moved to the most glaring absence. Aegis Station, he said, pointing. The system's main orbital station, a massive spoked construct that served as the Tithe port traffic control and primary defense anchor, was dark. Its lumen beacons were extinguished. Its docking arms were retracted. It floated dead in the void, a skeleton picked clean. Captain Krell's voice was ice. Open a Vox channel. Standard greeting? Authority code Administratum Fiscalis. Aye, Lord. Prell's fingers trembled. He activated the Vox. Aegis Station traffic control. This is the Chartist vessel Swift Prophet, bearing an Auditor Fiscalis of the Adeptus Terra. Respond. I say again, respond. The Vox was silent. Not the hiss of an open channel, but the dull, flat emptiness of a line that was not just unanswered, but disconnected. Try the planetary spire. Hive Primus. Lord Governor Tolus's office, Krell ordered. Again, Prell sent the signal. Hive Primus office of the Lord Governor. This is the Swift Prophet. We carry an emissary of the Administratum. Acknowledge. Nothing. A broad-spectrum hail, Krell commanded. All channels, system-wide. Prell's fear was now a tangible thing, a cold sweat on his brow. He did as he was told, amplifying the signal. This is Auditor Fiscalis Krell of the Adeptus Terra. This system is under formal audit. By the light of the Emperor, I command you to respond. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a sound crackled through the speaker. It was not a voice. It was a wet, clicking static, a rhythmic, chittering sound buried beneath a wall of white noise. It was a sound that made the hairs on Prell's neck stand on end, a sound that felt organic and wrong. It lasted for 10 seconds, then cut out, leaving the bridge in a silence more profound than before. Prell turned to Krell, his eyes wide with terror. "Lord Auditor, that is nothing I have ever heard. The station is dead. The planet is silent. My contract is for transport, not this. We must leave. We must report this to the Navy." Krell stared at the green-brown world below. He had a mission. He had a writ. The ledger was unbalanced and the answers were down there. The silence was not an acceptable excuse for a failed audit. Captain Prell Krell said, turning. His 2 combat servitors, Goliath 1 and Goliath 2, stepped up behind him, their metallic feet clamping onto the deck. "Your ship is an asset requisitioned by the Adeptus Terra. Your opinion is irrelevant. You will maintain this orbit and you will not break silence. You are a variable in my equation now." He pointed to the ship's LHO shuttle bay. "I am going down. My team and I will proceed to Hive Primus. The writ demands I speak to the governor and I will examine his ledgers." Go down there!" Prell was aghast. "Lord, it is a tomb, a trap. It is a line item on my slate," Captain Krell said, retrieving his data slate and the vellum scroll case, "and I will not return to Terra with an incomplete report. Ready the shuttle. That is the procedure." The yellow shuttle screamed as it tore through the upper atmosphere of Agria Secundus. Its descent was automated, locked onto the primary landing beacon of the Hive Primus starport. The flight was, according to the machine spirit, perfectly normal. The landing grid was active, the guidance signals were clean, but as the shuttle broke through the low perpetual overcast Auditor Fiscalis, Krell saw the truth. The starport was a vast expanse of cracked grey ferrocrete, larger than a city on a lesser world. It was designed to service a dozen super-heavy transports at once. It should have been swarming with thousands of workers with fuel trucks, cargo loaders, and PDF patrols. It was empty. The shuttle's landing gear touched down with a hollow screech that echoed across the abandoned field. The engines whined down, and a silence so profound it was a physical weight settled over them. Nothing moved. Not a single worker, not a single cogitator servitor. The only motion was a cloud of brown dust skittering across the landing pad, pushed by a high-altitude wind that whistled through the skeletal landing gantries. "Lord Auditor, one of the enforcers, a man named Rick," whispered, his hand tightening on his shock maul. "This is wrong. By the throne, it's like a tomb." Krell's expression was unchanged. He checked the clip on his auto-pistol, a weapon he had never fired, and then secured his data slate. "It is a location of non-compliance," he stated. "That is all. Goliath 1, Goliath 2, establish perimeter. Enforcers rear guard. I will lead." The shuttle ramp lowered with a hiss. Krell marched out onto the ferrocrete, his grey robes snapping in the cold wind. His entourage followed 2 massive combat servitors, their multi-barreled weapons whirring as they scanned the empty sky, and the 2 enforcers, Rick and Pasco, who looked tiny and vulnerable in comparison. They were a drop of ink on a blank page. The main terminal building was open, its vast blast doors locked in a halfway position. They proceeded inside. The great hall was a cavern of shadows. Tattered banners celebrating the glorious 900th year of compliance hung like cobwebs from the ceiling. Data screens were dark. Luggage transport stood where they had been left, piled high with cases that would never be claimed. There was no sign of violence, no bloodstains, no bodies. Just absence. The governor's palace, Krell said, consulting a map on his slate. 1 kilometer. We walk. The procedure must be followed. The walk through the upper spires of Hive Primus was a journey through a dead city. The vast walkways were empty. The hab blocks were silent. There were no lights in the windows, no voices, no machinery, just the ever-present whistling wind and the rhythmic, heavy thud clamp of the combat servitors' feet on the pla's steel. The enforcers Rick and Pasco stayed back to back, their eyes darting to every dark doorway, every shadowed alcove. They reached the governor's palace. Its towering gates, forged from bronze and iron, stood wide open. "Halt," Krell commanded. He scanned the entrance. The guardsmen who should have been there, the proud PDF of Agria Secundus, were gone. Their sentry boxes were empty. They entered the palace. The air inside was cold, stale, and carried a faint, unfamiliar scent. It was musty like a spoiled cellar with an underlying tang of ozone. Throne room, Krell ordered his boots, echoing on the marble floor. They found it at the end of the grand hall, and it was not empty. The throne room was vast, but it felt cramped, filled with shadows. At the far end upon the high-backed throne of Agria Secundus sat a man. He was a large, obese figure, draped in robes of state that were now stained and rumpled. This was Lord Governor Tolus. He was trembling, a palsy of pure terror shaking his entire frame. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, and fixed on Krell. But he was not alone. Flanking the throne, standing in the deepest shadows, were a dozen other figures. They were robed just as he was, but their robes were dark, obscuring. They stood perfectly still. Where Patolus was a sweating, trembling mass of pale flesh, these new advisors were unnervingly silent. Krell could see their faces, or parts of them, pallid, waxy skin and dark, unblinking eyes. Lord Governor Tolus Krell's voice was a hammer blow in the silence. He marched to the center of the room, his small team fanning out behind him. The two servitors raised their weapons, scanning the robed figures. Patolus flinched, a small cry escaping his lips. Who are you? More have come. I am Auditor Fiscalis Krell of the Adeptus Administratum. Krell unsealed the vellum case and produced the writ of audit. The scroll was heavy with wax seals, and he let it unroll with a loud thwop. I carry the writ of audit sealed by the Adeptus Terra. Your tithe is in default. Your world is silent. I am here to find out why. Patolus looked at the writ, then at the robed figures, then back to Krell. He seemed to be on the verge of collapse. A plague. Patolus stammered, his voice a wet, terrified gurgle. Yes, a terrible plague. It came from the grain, a blight. Horrible. It took so many. The workers, the PDF, all gone. A plague, Krell repeated. He did not ask. He stated. He was recording the data. Yes, and the harvest. It failed. Utterly failed. Taholus was starting to babble, his words tumbling over each other. We were afraid. Afraid to report the failure. We thought we could fix it. The harvester's bounty. It couldn't leave. Nothing to send. We are loyal, I swear. Tell Terra we are loyal. The tithe it will be late, but it will be paid as soon as the blight is cleansed. Krell stared at the governor. The man's story was inefficient. It was full of statistical holes. A plague and a blight, both at the same time. A planet of billions silenced by a crop failure. And why had they not sent an astropathic warning? His cold, analytical gaze drifted from Tolus to the silent figures beside the throne. He was an auditor. He was trained to see the smallest detail, the single misplaced number that reveals the entire fraud. One of the advisors, a tall figure standing just behind the governor's left shoulder, shifted. Its dark robe rustled. Krell's eyes, trained by decades of looking for what shouldn't be there, locked onto the figure. The robe was heavy, but the figure's posture was wrong. It was too still, and as it shifted, Krell saw it. Hidden in the deep folds of the dark cloth, a third arm. It was not a human arm. It was pale, sinuous, and ended in a hand that was not a hand but a claw, sharp and chitinous. It had moved to rest possessively on the back of Patolus's throne, as if steadying its puppet. Krell's face did not change. He made no sound. But his mind, a machine of pure cold logic, took this new, impossible variable and began a new calculation. Plague, blight, lies. New variable 3 arms, Xenos. He slowly, meticulously began to roll up the writ of audit. Your explanation, Krell said, his voice as cold as the empty starport, has been recorded. Auditor Fiscalis Krell did not react to the monstrous revelation. He did not gasp or draw his weapon. The third arm was simply a data point, the most significant one he had yet collected. It was the key that unlocked the fraud. his mind, which had been processing a case of incompetence, now recalibrated for active deception and Xenos contamination. He rolled the writ of audit and slid it back into its vellum case. He turned away from the trembling governor and his silent three-armed keepers. "Your verbal testimony is noted, Lord or Governor Krell," said his voice echoing in the cold room. "However, the procedure demands physical verification. I am here to audit your ledgers, not your excuses. I require access to the Hall of Records, the Tithe Vault Data Shrine." Now, this was not a request. It was a command backed by the full authority of the Adeptus Terra. Patolus looked horrified. He glanced at the robed figures who remained utterly still. "Access now," he stammered. "Auditor, that is not possible. The data shrine is offline. The plague, you see. The tech priests. They are all ill. Then I will examine them myself," Krell stated. He pointed his data slate at Patolus. "Provide your access codes." One of the robed advisors hissed. It was a low, sibilant sound like escaping gas. It stepped forward, its three-armed silhouette now unmistakable. "The Lord Governor is unwell," a strange, multi-toned voice rasped from beneath its hood. "He will see. No one. Your audit is complete. Leave." Krell turned to face the creature. He looked at it not as a monster, but as an unauthorized signatory. "You are not a recognized authority. You have no standing in this matter." Goliath 1 removed this impediment. The combat servitor's multi-barreled weapon whined as it aimed at the robed figure. "Target unauthorized." "Remove," its vox speaker blared. For a second, the room tensed. The robed figure stared at the servitor. Then, faster than any human eye could follow, it moved. It didn't step, it flowed, launching itself off the dais. But Krell's team was already moving. Enforcer's Procedure 77 Alpha Subdue, Krell snapped. Enforcer Rick, trained in crowd control, fired his shock maul's charge. A bolt of blue energy struck the creature, but instead of incapacitating it, it just made it shriek, revealing a flash of purple-gray skin and a maw full of fangs. Xenos Pasco screamed, opening fire with his last pistol. It was too late. The creature was upon them. It slammed into Rick, its third arm's claws, tearing through the Enforcer's flak vest as if it were paper. Rick fell his life data, winking out on Krell's slate. Goliath 1, Goliath 2 Purge, Krell commanded, stepping back, his pistol finally in his hand. The servitors opened fire. The sound of the heavy stubbers was deafening in the throne room, turning the creature into a red mist. But as it fell, all the other robed figures threw back their hoods. They were not human. They were horrifying hybrids, a blasphemous mix of human and alien. Their faces distorted, their arms mismatched, their eyes burning with a cold blue light. They swarmed from the shadows, chittering and shrieking. Auditor Pasco yelled, pulling Krell back. "We must fall back to the shuttle." Negative Krell's voice was sharp, cutting through the gunfire. "Data must be secured, the vault. We must confirm the deficit." His mind, even in the chaos of battle, was locked on his procedure. The why was now confirmed as Xenos, but the what, the Tithe, was still unverified. The vault. This way, Pasco shouted, dragging Krell towards a side exit as Goliath 2 laid down a curtain of suppressing fire. Goliath 1 was already being torn apart by 3 of the creatures. As they ran, a figure stumbled out from a hidden alcove, a palace serf, his robes in tatters, his eyes wide with madness. He grabbed Krell's arm, his fingers like claws. They heard it. The serf gibbered. His voice cracked with terror. They heard the call. The Star Saviors. "Get off me," Pasco yelled, raising his last pistol. "No, wait," Krell commanded, his eyes fixed on the man. "Report." What did they hear? "The bounty." The man shrieked as gunfire echoed down the hall. "The Harvester's bounty. It never left, it came back. Full of the gods, the four-armed gods. They didn't take the grain. They blessed it, they consumed it. It's the day of ascension. We are all food for the gods." The man's words hit Krell harder than a bullet. Consumed. The entire tithe. 30 million tons of grain. Not stolen, not lost, eaten, turned into something else. The serf was cut down by a stray last bolt from a hybrid further down the hall. Pasco fell a claw in his back. Goliath, too, made a sound like a dying animal as it was overwhelmed. Krell was alone. He looked at the dead serf, then at the data port for the Hall of Records. He was an auditor. He needed proof. He ran his grey robes flying and slammed his data port into the vault's console. The doors were sealed, but the network was active. He downloaded the core manifests, his mind racing, as the data streamed directly into his brain. It was all there. The forgery was laughably crude. Population numbers hadn't decreased. They had been reallocated to subsurface reclamation projects. Food production hadn't vanished. It had been diverted to Tithe Vault T13. He had it, the proof. He tore his hand from the port, his auto-pistol firing blindly at the chittering horrors that were now sprinting down the hall towards him. He ignored the palace exits. He knew where he had to go. He had to see the ledger for himself. He ran for the lift, punching the button for the lowest level. Tithe Vault T13. He had to see the final calculation. The lift doors closed, and he descended into the planet's dark, horrifying truth. The lift doors hissed open, not onto a vault, but onto a nightmare. Tithe Vault T13 was supposed to be a cavernous silo kilometers deep, filled with golden life-giving grain. Krell's data slate was preloaded with its schematics. Instead, his boots landed on a pulsing, fleshy membrane that covered the floor. The air was hot, wet, and smelled of a charnel house. The vault was a vast organic pit. Where 30 million tons of grain should have been, there was now a churning, digestive lake of purple-gray biomass. Thick-ribbed tendrils snaked up the walls, connecting to pulsating sacs that hung from the ceiling, each one dripping a viscous fluid. The entire structure of the vault had been converted. The serf's words echoed in his mind. Consumed. Krell stared his mind for the first time, struggling to process the data. This was not just a failure to pay. This was an inversion. The tithe, the planet's holy obligation, had been used as food to birth this abomination. A screech from above broke his paralysis. High on the wall, a hybrid, its claws digging into the fleshy membrane, was pointing at him. It shrieked again, a sound that was both a word and a cry, an alarm. Instantly, the entire pit came alive. The chittering static he'd heard on the Vox exploded around him 1,000-fold. From tunnels bored into the flesh walls from the pool of bubbling biomass, the hybrids emerged. Dozens, then hundreds of them. Their pale, multi-armed forms swarmed towards him, the true balance of Agria Secundus's population. His combat servitors were gone. His enforcers were dead. He was an auditor alone in a vault of monsters. Krell ran. He was not a warrior. He was not a hero. He was a man of procedure, and the procedure for this was survival only insofar as it allowed reporting. He fumbled in his grey robes, his hand grasping the one tool he had left that mattered, a small silver cylinder. The single-use astropathic beacon. He slammed the lift button, but the doors were already sealed, the control panel dead. The Xenos had the system. He turned and ran for the emergency stairs. His flight was a desperate, wheezing scramble. His lungs burned, his thin legs ached. He was a man of desks and data slates, not of pursuit. Behind him he heard the skittering, clicking claws of the hybrids on the metal steps. They were toying with him, he realized, herding him. He burst out of the vault level into a mid-hive maintenance corridor. The city was no longer silent. It was awake. The alarm was sounding everywhere, a deep, resonant biological thrum that he could feel in his teeth. Lights flickered, revealing walls that seemed to be breathing, covered in the same purplish-gray membrane as the vault. The hive itself was being digested. He ran towards the starport, his only goal. His data slate was still clutched in one hand, the beacon in the other. He was an accountant, and he would deliver his report. He stumbled out onto the vast, empty starport. The wind was still whistling a cold, clean sound in this world of corruption. His shuttle was there 100 meters away, a small grey shape of hope. He ran, his breath sobbing in his chest. The chittering was right behind him. He reached the shuttle, slamming his hand on the ramp release. The ramp hissed open, but as he scrambled inside, he saw the truth. It was a trap. The cockpit was destroyed, ripped apart from the inside. The Vox unit was smashed. The astropathic relay was torn out, its wires sparking. He was not meant to escape. He was expected. The hybrids were fanning out, surrounding the shuttle, cutting off his retreat. They were not attacking. They were waiting. Krell stood on the shuttle ramp, a lone grey figure in the wind. He looked at the ruined cockpit, then at the silver beacon in his hand. He had his proof. He had his data slate. He had his final duty. He could not flee, but he could report. He triggered the beacon. It was not a Vox message. It was a single compressed burst of pure data code and psychic intent aimed at the heavens. He poured his frigid analytical soul into it, a final perfect line item. Tithe failed. Total. Cause Xenos infestation. Genus unknown, codename Star Saviors. Magnitude planetary saturation. Asset Agria Secundus is 100% loss. All manifests fraudulent. Population compromised. Governor Tolus compromised. Imperial forces compromised. The Tithe was not stolen, it was consumed. Recommend planetary quarantine and extermination. Code Purge Alpha 1. Audit complete. Huangzhe Fu Ho. As he sent it, he knew it was a death sentence. The beacon would burn out his location to the things on this world, and it would burn out the mind of the astropath who received it on Terra. But the message would be delivered. The ledger would be balanced. A shadow fell over him. The chittering hybrids parted, bowing in horrific reverence. From the dark maw of the main terminal, a thing emerged. It was massive, a monster of nightmare towering over the hybrids. It had 4 powerful arms, a huge fanged maw, and a ribbed alien cranium. Its eyes, ancient and intelligent, glowed with a cold blue psychic light. This was the master, the source of the fraud, the patriarch. It advanced on Krell, its movements slow, deliberate, and utterly confident. Auditor Fiscalis Krell did not beg. He did not pray. He stood on the ramp, his auto-pistol useless in his hand. He looked at the monster, the source of the grandest, most heretical accounting error he had ever witnessed. He had done his job. As the creature's shadow engulfed him, Krell let his data slate fall from his numb fingers. His ledger. It clattered on the ferrocrete, its screen flickering one last time, showing the final terrible balance. His audit was complete. Far across the galaxy, shrouded in the psychic smog of Terra's own teeming quadrillions, lay the Scolai Saikana. Deep within its black basalt towers, in a chamber of absolute silence, sat the astropathic choir of the solar segmentum. They were a gallery of withered ancient figures, their bodies broken, their minds chained to the will of the Emperor. Astropath Primus Vernon was one such figure. He was little more than a husk, his eyes long since burned out by the fires of the ritual soul-binding. For 2 centuries he had sat in this chair, a living relay for the data of an empire. He was a receiver waiting for a signal, and then Krell's message arrived. It did not come as a voice. It tore across the immaterium as a single compressed high-velocity spike of pure cold data, a psychic bullet, fired from a dying mind. Vernon's body frail as it was snapped bolt upright, his chains rattling. A single thin scream of pure static escaped his lips. His handlers, adepts in grey, watched with detached interest. The astropath's blind eyes snapped open, revealing scarred white orbs. He was not seeing the chamber. He was seeing Agria Secundus. He was not hearing the silence. He was hearing the chittering. The cold, analytical mind of Krell, his final report slammed into Vernon's own. He felt the cold wind of the starport. He saw the shadow of the patriarch. He tasted the acidic air of the biomass pit. And he understood with perfect, terrible clarity the numbers on the final fallen ledger. Audit Vernon shrieked, his voice a horrifying, multi-toned cry. The other astropaths in the choir stirred and moaned, their own minds touched by the psychic backlash. Vernon began to convulse, his body jerking violently in his throne. He was gurgling Krell's report, the words mixing with the alien static. Tithe, failed, total, star saviors, consumed. The adepts moved in their psychic dampeners raised, but it was too late. Krell's message was a poisoned dart, and Vernon had taken its full payload. Saturation, extremis, code purge Alpha 1. Vernon arched his back, a final agonizing spasm. His voice rose to a glass-shattering pitch. Audit complete, Emperor. Prot, a flash of blue-white flame erupted from his eye sockets and open mouth. The psychic fire consumed his mind, the overload too much for his frail human form. His head slumped forward, steam, and the smell of ozone rising from his scorched body. He was dead. One of the adepts calmly made a notation on a slate. Receiver 77 expired. Log the transmission. A servitor moved in its metal claws, clicking to unchain the body and clear the throne for the next astropath in line. The message had been received. The raw, agonizing scream of Vernon, recorded and scrubbed of its psychic overspill, was shunted to a decryption shrine deep within the administratum complex. A scribe veritor, his face augmented with auditory filters, listened to the recording. He ignored the terror, the death gurgle, the alien static. He listened only for the code. He typed, his fingers a blur. The file for Agria Secundus, still bearing the red flag deficit in question, was open on his slate. The scribe veritor stopped typing. His blood ran cold as the final words of the report were confirmed and verified. Xenos infestation, magnitude extremis, code purge Alpha 1. He did not hesitate. He did not ask for confirmation. He was a cog, and this was his function. He slammed his fist onto a black skull-marked rune on his console. Instantly, the entire nature of the problem changed. In the sensorite chambers, Hax watched as the file for Agria Secundus on his master slate flashed once, then changed. The red deficit flag vanished. The file's border turned from gray to a deep, ominous black. A new file classification appeared, superseding all others. Asset Agria Secundus status, total loss, classification, Xenos infestation, extremis. Hax's authority over the file simply evaporated. The data became locked, his clearance suddenly insufficient. A new message appeared. Jurisdiction transferred. The Adeptus Administratum, the vast engine of imperial bureaucracy, had just done something it almost never did. It had written off an asset. The problem of Agria Secundus was no longer about a shortfall of grain. It was no longer a calculation of loss. It was no longer an accounting problem. The file with its new terrible classification was automatically and instantly shunted from the ledgers of the accountants to the war rooms of the Adeptus Terra. Simultaneously, a copy was routed via the most secure and secret data links to the Segmentum Solar Fortress of the one organization that dealt with such matters as a matter of course, the Holy Ordos of the Emperor's Inquisition. The file was now in their hands. The message, now scrubbed of all emotion and encoded as high-priority data, did not have to travel far from the Administratum's scriptorums. On Terra, within the vast, shadowy complex of the Imperial Palace, it found its way to a sealed chamber belonging to the Ordo Xenos. The chamber was dark, its walls lined with trophies of alien slaying, the skull of an orc war boss, the tattered robes of an elder farseer, the chitinous claw of a tyrannid warrior. In the center, bathed in the cold blue light of a data slate, sat Inquisitor Helena Vex. Vex was a woman who looked as if she were carved from ice and steel. Her black, severe carapace armor was polished to a mirror shine, adorned only with the eye of the Inquisition. Her hair was shaved save for a single white blonde top knot. Her eyes were cold augmented and missed nothing. She was a Puritan, a zealot who believed in the absolute, unblemished purity of man. To her, the alien was not just a threat, it was a sin, a stain on the holy fabric of the Imperium. She read Krell's final desperate report. She absorbed the data. Tithe failed. Xenos, saturation, purge Alpha 1. She saw the name Star Saviors and the description of a three-armed creature. Her blood did not run cold. It boiled. She recognized the signs, the creeping, insidious rot of the Genestealer cult, An entire world, a grade Primus asset, had fallen not to an invasion but to infection. It had rotted from within. To Helena Vex, this was not just a military problem. It was a personal failure of the Imperium, a filth that had been allowed to fester. "So the accountants have lost an asset," she whispered to the empty room, her voice like cracking ice. "And they come to us to cleanse their ledgers." She did not need to ask for permission. She did not need to convene a council. Her authority was absolute, granted by the High Lords themselves. Her rosette, the symbol of her office, was her only justification. She rose, her movements precise. She activated her high-priority astropathic link. She was not requesting. She was commanding. "This is Inquisitor Helena Vex Ordo Xenos." Her voice cut through the channel aimed at the command bridge of the Imperial Navy Battlefleet Solar. "By my authority, I am enacting Inquisitorial Mandate 73 Delta. Divert Battlegroup Scylla. All assets. Effective immediately." Miles away on the bridge of the flagship Emperor's Fury Lord, Admiral Koth gaped at the message. "Divert. We are en route to the Scylla front. The entire Cadian 81st Army is relying on our support." Vex's voice returned, devoid of all patience. "Lord Admiral, you are transporting 5 regiments of Cadian shock troops, are you not?" "Yes, Inquisitor. The 112th through the 116th. They are vital. They are now my regiments," Vex stated flatly. "Your battle group and its cargo are hereby requisitioned for the cleansing of Agria Secundus. The Scylla front will hold, or it will not. That is a problem for the Munitorum. My problem is a world that has fallen to the Xenos. You have your orders. Change course, or you will be charged with impeding an inquisitorial investigation, and I will have your bridge purged." The Vox was silent. "Then yes, Inquisitor Vex. Course changing to Agria Secundus. By your will." Helena Vex closed the channel. She had just diverted 5 regiments of the Imperium's finest soldiers, tens of thousands of men, and their entire naval escort as easily as an accountant would move a decimal point. She began to assemble her own team, a cell of Deathwatch Space Marines, the elite alien hunters of the Ordo Xenos, who were stationed on her own black ship. She opened the file for Agria Secundus again, this time on a tactical map. Her gaze was cold and analytical. The plan forming in her mind was not one of rescue. That word was meaningless. The population was compromised, the asset corrupted. You do not rescue a limb overcome with gangrene. You amputate it. The plan was one of maintenance. Agria Secundus was an asset. It was a farm. The farm had been overrun by vermin. The current crop was a total loss. The job, therefore, was simple. Establish orbital supremacy. Exterminate the vermin root and stem. Burn the fields and the existing crop the population to ensure no trace of the infection remained. Restore the asset to functionality. It was a large-scale pest control operation. The lives of the Cadians who would die taking the world back, the lives of the billions on the planet's surface. They were not a factor. They were the cost, a necessary expenditure to balance the books and restore the tithe. Auditor Krellvex said to the data slate, a flicker of cold respect in her eyes. "Your audit is accepted. We are coming to collect." Battle Group. Scylla did not arrive quietly. It tore its way back into real space with the violent, thunderous boom of displaced reality. A fleet of righteous fury emerging from the hell of the Imperium. Led by the grand cruiser Emperor's Fury and flanked by a host of cruisers and frigates, the fleet was a bristling wall of steel guns and divine purpose. Tucked safely within its protective screen were the massive transports carrying 5 regiments of Cadian shock troops. Inquisitor Helena Vex stood on the armored bridge of her own ship, the Black Sword. She observed the system not with a tactical eye, but with the cold, appraising gaze of an executioner. Her first target swam into view, Aegis Station. It was not the silent, dark husk that Auditor Krell had witnessed. The weeks that had passed had given the Xenos infection time to work. The station was no longer a construct of imperial steel. It was a grotesque, bloated thing, a nightmarish fusion of metal and pulsating purple-black alien flesh. Thick chitinous spines had erupted from its docking arms. Its sensor domes were now glowing organic eyes. It was a tumor in the void, a blasphemy hanging in the holy light of the Emperor's star. Lord Admiral Koth Vex's voice was pure ice broadcast across the fleet-wide channel. That thing is an offense to my eyes. Purge it. On the bridge of the Emperor's fury, Lord Admiral Koth did not question the order. He was a tool of her will. All ships he commanded his voice tight. Target the primary orbital station. Full broadsides. On my mark. Fire. The void flashed white. Dozens of ships from the smallest frigates to the grand cruiser unleashed their fury. Lances of pure, white-hot energy brighter than a sun sliced through the station. Hordes of macro-cannon shells, each the size of a hab block, slammed into the corrupted flesh and steel. The station did not explode. It burst, a silent, horrific detonation of alien ichor, molten metal, and superheated gas. It vanished, cleansed from the sky. Vex's cold gaze moved to the planet below. The infection has had months to root, she declared. We will not allow it to spread. Admiral, your data slates have been updated with secondary targets. Koth looked at the targets Vex had designated. He felt a moment of cold hesitation. They were not military sites. They were the planet's secondary and tertiary hive clusters, Theron Minor Purity 7, and the Gammas industrial nodes. Inquisitor, he ventured, his voice careful, those are civilian centers. Not related to the primary food production. They are irrelevant to the Tithe, Admiral Vex cut him off. They are population centers, which means they are breeding grounds. They are vectors for the infection. We are not here to save a population, we are here to reclaim an asset. Containment protocol is to be enacted before ground deployment. Burn them. A terrible final understanding settled over the Lord Admiral. All batteries, he ordered, his voice now a dead monotone. Realign targets, planetary bombardment, execute. From high orbit, the lances of the Imperial Navy fell like the tears of a vengeful god. The beams of energy struck the smaller cities, overwhelming all defenses. They did not just destroy, they sterilized. The hive clusters were erased from the face of Agria Secundus in moments their populations turned to ash, the very ground they stood on to glass. The purge had begun by killing millions, all to ensure the primary harvest fields of Hive Primus were isolated. Vex watched the planet burn. It is contained. She turned to the Cadian transports. General, she voxed the ranking Cadian officer. Your objective is now clear. The main asset, Hive Primus, is ripe for cleansing. The landing zones have been pre-cleared. The sky above Hive Primus, which had been silent for Auditor Krell, now turned black with Imperial craft. The first wave descended, thousands of steel-grey drop pods hurtling like meteors towards the starport and the Governor's Spire. Close behind them, the sky filled with the buzzing, angry shapes of Valkyrie transports, their side doors bristling with the laser guns of the Cadian 112th. The ground invasion of Agria Secundus had begun. The Cadian 112th hit the starport at full force. Their drop pods, slamming onto the same ferrocrete where Krell's shuttle had landed, cracked the ground and raised clouds of dust. Ramps blasted open before the pods had even settled, and the disciplined, grim-faced soldiers of Cadia poured out. They were the best of the Astra Militarum. Born in war, raised for battle, they were the Emperor's most steadfast human weapon. They moved with a terrifying, practiced efficiency, forming overlapping fields of fire, setting up heavy bolter emplacements, and establishing Vox links within seconds. Perimeter set, Sergeant Corvus of the 112th yelled, his voice a gravelly bark over the wind. Watch the tunnels, watch the shadows. The Inquisitor says this city is the enemy. They were prepared for a fight. They were not prepared for the nature of it. The attack did not come from the front. It came from below. With a horrific, unified shriek, the battle for Hive Primus began. Every sewer grate, every maintenance hatch, every ventilation duct exploded outwards as a tide of Xenos horrors burst from the ground. Genestealer hybrids, their forms ranging from mostly human to four-armed monstrosities, swarmed onto the starport. They carried a mix of stolen Imperial autoguns, crude mining tools, and their own razor-sharp claws. Contact, contact, front, left, and below. Corvus roared, leveling his laser gun. Fire at will, purge these freaks. The Cadian line erupted in a wall of laser fire. The air filled with the stench of ozone and vaporized alien flesh. The heavy bolters thudded their explosive shells, tearing massive bloody holes in the charging horde. But the horde did not stop. For every hybrid that fell, 2 more seemed to take its place. They moved with a terrifying speed and a suicidal devotion, ignoring their own losses as they crashed into the Cadian lines. It became a churning, brutal melee. Lassphere flashed at point-blank range, chainswords roared, and claws met bayonets. The Cadians held. They were Cadians. They always held. But they were dying. While the 112th was locked in a desperate battle for the beachhead Inquisitor, Vex enacted her own plan. She was not a general, she was a surgeon. Her tools were not the massed regiments of the Guard, but the elite post-human warriors of the Death Watch. Aboard her ship, the Black Sword, her kill team assembled. They were giants of black-armored myth, Brother Sergeant Arian, an ultramarine, the tactician, Brother Zalvius, a blood angel, his fury barely leashed, and Brother Moriael, a dark angel, silent and watchful. Our target is the Synapse, Vex addressed them, her voice devoid of emotion as she stood beside their teleportarium. The Cadians are the hammer, we are the blade, we will cut the head from this beast, we strike at the governor's palace, now the primary lair of the cult's leadership. Find the Magus, find the Patriarch, kill them both, the rest of the infection will wither. The teleportarium flared, and in a crackle of blue-white energy, the 4 of them were gone. They materialized not in the cold throne room Krell had seen, but in the heart of a full-blown Xenos nest. The palace was unrecognizable, its walls thick with the same pulsing biomass. They were instantly swarmed. For the Death Watch, it was not a battle, it was a cleansing. Arian's bolt gun boomed, each shell a pinpoint-accurate detonation. Zalvius was a red blur, his chainsword singing as he tore through the hybrids. Moriael held the rear, his plasma gun venting searing hot death. Vex herself moved with them, her bolt pistol spitting flame, her power sword, truth, an icy blue arc in the dark. They did not stop. They did not slow. They were death incarnate, moving towards the psychic stench of the cult's leadership. Meanwhile, on the other side of the hive, the Cadian 113th Regiment advanced on their objective, the Tithe vaults. They found what Krell had found a nightmare. Vault after vault had been converted into biomass pits, charnel houses, and breeding grounds. The stench was unbearable. But then they found Vault Primus Alpha, the largest one. Its seals were intact. "Get it open!" their captain roared. The heavy doors were breached. The Cadians stared, their torches cutting through the dark. It was grain. 30 million tons of it. Untouched. The golden harvest waiting. It was the last unsecured tithe of Agria Secundus, and the cult knew they were there. A roar echoed from the tunnels. This was not a skirmish. This was the planet's entire remaining force. The cultists, led by lumbering aberrants and pure strain genostealers, launched a desperate final counterattack. They knew that if the grain was lost, their ascension was meaningless. "Hold this vault!" The Cadian captain yelled, his voice echoing in the vast silo. "Form a line, heavy weapons at the door." The Cadian soldiers born on a fortress world now found themselves defending a farm. They formed a line in the shadow of a mountain of grain. The battle that followed was hellish. The hybrids poured in. The Cadians fought their backs to the food that would feed worlds they had never heard of. A trooper fell, his blood spilling onto the golden kernels. A heavy bolter team was overwhelmed, their dying screams cut short. "Hold!" the captain roared, firing his bolt pistol into the mass. This is the tithe. This is the reason. Hold the line." They died. Dozens of them. Hundreds. They died protecting grain. They died fulfilling the duty of the dead Auditor Krell, ensuring that the spreadsheets on Terra, the grand ledger of the Imperium, would one day be balanced. Their blood paid the price for the missing entry, a debt settled in a silo of food at the edge of the galaxy. While the Cadian Guard bled and died in the starports and silos, Inquisitor Helena Vex and her Death Watch kill team reached the heart of the infection, the governor's throne room. It was no longer a room, it was a cathedral of blasphemy. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, all were covered in the same rippling, pulsating purple flesh. The air was thick with a psychic thrum that grated on the mind. At the room's center, the throne dais remained, but the throne itself was now a monstrous living thing. And upon it, or rather fused with it, was Lord Governor Ptolus. He was barely recognizable as human. His obese form was bloated to 3 times its normal size, his flesh pale and translucent, his veins pulsing with a dark, alien ichor. Thick, fleshy tubes and tendrils grew from his body, plugging him into the throne, which was now a grotesque biological command and control node. His eyes were wide open, rolled back, his mouth slack and drooling. He was a living battery, a psychic amplifier for the cult's collective consciousness. As Vex and the Space Marines entered their boots, sinking into the fleshy floor, the Patriarch itself, the one Krell had faced, was there standing over Ptolus like a priest at an altar. It shrieked a psychic blast of pure hatred and launched itself at the Death Watch. "The Patriarch is mine!" Vex commanded, her voice cutting through the din. "Brother Sergeant, hold the line." Xalvius Moriel cleansed the Broodguard. The chamber exploded into chaos. The Blood Angel and the Dark Angel engaged the hulking hybrids guarding the throne, their blades and guns a whirlwind of righteous destruction. Arian formed a defensive perimeter, his bolt gun barking as he methodically executed every lesser creature that skittered from the shadows. Vex herself moved towards the throne. She was not a space marine, but she moved with a speed and grace that was more than human. She met the Patriarch's 4-armed charge, her power sword Truth, crashing against its chitinous claws in a shower of blue sparks. This was the true battle, the Inquisitor versus the alien god. As they fought their duel, a blur of silver and purple, Ptolus's eyes rolled forward. He saw Vex, his mind trapped in a nightmare, fractured. He saw the Imperial Aquila on her armor. He saw the cold, human face. "Mercy!" He gurgled, the sound thick with alien fluid. "Praise the Emperor. You've come to see the new way." Vex parried a claw that would have decapitated her, her augmented eyes analyzing the governor's state. He was still alive, still conscious. He saved us. Ptolus babbled, his gaze shifting to the Patriarch locked in combat with Vex. The Emperor's tithe. It was too much. The blight, the famine. We would have died. We would have been punished. Vex's face was a mask of cold fury. She ducked under a sweeping blow and plunged her sword into the Patriarch's shoulder, eliciting an inhuman scream. He came. Ptolus cried, tears of ichor streaming down his face, the 4-armed savior. He offered us a way, a new god, a better god, one who feeds us, not bleeds us. I saved my people. I saved them from the ledgers. I accepted. You failed. Vex's voice was a low, lethal hiss. She kicked the Patriarch in its chest, sending it staggering back, and for a single perfect second, she was standing directly in front of the throne. She looked at the pathetic, corrupted mass of flesh that had been Ptolus. You were weak. You believed the lies of the Xenos because you feared the truth of the Administratum. It was for my people. He wept. Vex raised her bolt pistol, its muzzle inches from the governor's face. The Emperor does not ask for your understanding. He does not care for your people's suffering. She said, her voice, the cold, final judgment of the Imperium itself. He demands only your obedience. Your tithe was your life, and you gave it to this. The Patriarch lunged, screaming as it saw her intent. It was too late. Vex fired. The bolt shell hit Ptolus's head, and the resulting explosion vaporized the entire upper half of the throne. The psychic shriek from the governor's dying mind was a thunderclap, and the connection he had maintained broke. The Patriarch faltered, its psychic power, base ripped away. All over the hive hybrid stumbled, clutching their heads, their link to the Overmind severed by the Inquisitor's single damning shot. It was the opening the Death Watch needed. Brother Zalvius roared his chainsword, finding a purchase. Vex, her face spattered with the governor's corrupted blood, turned back to the now vulnerable Xenos leader. "Your puppet is dead," she spat. "Your audit is over." The death of the Patriarch and the severing of the cult's overmind did not end the war. It ended the fight. What remained was a simple, brutal extermination. The Cadian shock troops, now masters of the surface, began the true purge. Led by Inquisitor Vex's uncompromising orders, this was not a pacification. It was a sterilization. Flamethrower teams descended into the hive's substructures, turning biomass pits into roaring infernos. Every tunnel, every hab block, every dark recess was scoured with promethium. The war for Agria Secundus lasted 6 more months. It was 6 months of grinding, merciless urban cleansing. The Cadians, with their grim-faced professionalism, did their duty. They executed every survivor they found. There was no way to tell the infected from the pure, and as Inquisitor Vex had decreed, purity is a luxury we cannot afford. Contamination is a fact we must erase. The planet's original population was officially and administratively declared a total loss. They were no longer citizens. They were biomass to be purged. Finally, the day came when the last Cadian patrol reported no contact. The hive was silent, scoured by fire, its streets washed clean with blood. Inquisitor Vex stood on the starport, the wind whipping her black coat. The air stank of ash and cooked meat. She was joined by General Mar, the surviving commander of the Cadian 113th, a man with a face like a cratered battlefield. "The asset is clean," General Vex stated, not as a congratulation, but as a fact. "My regiment's paid for it," Mar grunted, his voice heavy. He had lost thousands of soldiers, paid for a farm. "They paid for the Imperium," Vex corrected him, her voice like steel. "And the price is not yet settled. Your duty is not concluded." She produced a data slate. "You are hereby appointed military governor regent of this asset. Your former command is now its garrison. Your new title is Lord Governor Tithe Master." Mar looked at her, his eyes dead. "Inquisitor, I am a soldier, not a farmer. My men are shock troops, not laborers. The population is gone. Who in the Emperor's name is supposed to work these fields?" As if on cue, a new alert chimed on the starport's Vox system. A new fleet was translating into orbit. Mar looked up. These were not the sleek, deadly frigates of the Imperial Navy. They were vast, rusting, filth-encrusted ships, penal colony transports, hulks from the Incarceran system. "Your new workforce has arrived," Governor Tithe Master Vex said. The ramps of the prison ships lowered. There were no honor guards, only armed servitors and grim-faced arbitrators. A human tide was forced out onto the Ferrocrete. Billions of them. They were the dregs of the Imperium criminals from penal worlds, populations from planets that had failed their own tithes, entire families declared unproductive. They were pale, thin, and terrified. They were slaves in all but name. They were herded by the thousands at the point of the Cadians' lasguns out of the hive and towards the vast, fallow grain fields. Vex addressed the first terrified wave of them, her voice amplified by a Vox hailer. "You are here for one purpose. You have no names. You have no rights. You have only your duty. This is Agria Secundus. It is a farm. You are its tools. You will work. You will plant. You will harvest. You will meet the tithe that your betters died to secure. If you meet the tithe, you will be permitted to live to meet it again next year. If you fail..." She paused, letting the cold wind carry her words. "The Cadians who guard you are veterans of a Xenos purge. They are very, very good at killing." She turned her duty here complete. The Cadian soldiers, their faces hidden by their helmets, aimed their lasguns at the backs of the new farmers, forcing them into the fields. The slaves stumbled their feet, sinking into the ash-rich soil of their new home, their prison and their grave. The asset Agria Secundus was being rebooted. The planting had begun. A standard Terran year passed. In the orbit of a newly renamed world, a single scarred and hastily armed transport vessel took on its cargo. Its name, crudely painted on its hull, was the Obedience. It was carrying the first Tithe shipment from the planet Agria Tergus Agria the Cleansed. The shipment was late. It was only 48% of the quota established 9 centuries prior. It was a pathetic figure, produced by the billions of slaves who now worked, ate, and died in the fields under the lasgun watch of Cadian veteran soldiers who were now jailers. Several million slaves had perished from exhaustion, starvation, or summary execution to encourage the others. Their deaths were recorded not as a tragedy, but as acceptable manpower attrition. But the ship had left, and it had arrived at the Castor Prime way station. In the scriptorum massive on Holy Terra, Scribe Prefectus Valerius, or another exactly like him, received a data update. He opened the file for Agria Secundus, now unlocked from its purged status. He entered the new data. Output 48%. Tithe status active underperforming. He closed the file. The planet's profile was once again just a green number on an endless spreadsheet. Higher up the hierarchy, Sensorite Hacks reviewed a final report. Inquisitor Vex's report on the re-sanctification of the asset was filed. Military Governor Mars' report on the first yield was confirmed. The incident, the disruption in the data flow, was resolved. Hacks took his physical steel stamp and slammed it down on the summary case closed. Beside it lay a smaller file, Auditor Fiscalis Krell. Status lost in the performance of duty. Sensorite Hacks added a note. Expenditures reimbursed. File closed. Krell's name was removed from the active ledger, a minor cost written off against the maintenance of the machine. And aboard her ship, the Black Sword, already en route to another Xenos hotspot in the Damocles Gulf, Inquisitor Helena Vex, had not thought of Agria Secundus in months. She was reviewing data on a 6-legged reptilian race that had defaulted on its Prometheum tithe. Her work, like the Imperium's, was never done. No one recorded the true cost. The millions of Cadian soldiers and the billions of Agrian citizens, the infected and the innocent who were burned with them, did not exist on the tithe ledger. They were a rounding error, the sunk cost of an audit. They were the zeros after the decimal point. The ledger recorded only tithe restored. This is the truth of the 41st millennium. The boundless cruelty of the Imperium is not malice. It does not stem from hatred or sadism for its own sake. It is something far colder. It is systemic indifference. It is the unblinking logic of a machine that cannot for a single second stop consuming its own fuel. 1,000,000 worlds must feed 1,000,000 more so that quadrillions may fight and die in a war that can never be won. This machine has no room for compassion, no tolerance for weakness, and absolutely no allowance for failure. Failure is not an option. It is not a tragedy. It is quite simply an accounting error, one that must be corrected. And in the Imperium of man, the ledger is always balanced, with fire and with blood.